Setting the scene. The interest of the place was not on its beauty, its own transcendent qualities, but the way it bounced off my life and the lives of those around me, the character it became. This quote is from the reading I asked you to do in Tell It Slant. So Tell It Slant, that reading talks a lot about various authors' connection to nature and how that becomes an important character within a story. But there are many settings that can be really important for more than just, a general sense of place. So when you are writing scene, and this is particularly important for short pieces, and your first piece that you're writing is a short piece. It's 800 to 1,000 words. And although there's no really strict guidelines for flash nonfiction, generally speaking, flash nonfiction is thought of as anything from maybe 100 words or somewhere in that neighborhood up to 1,000 words. So depending upon what submission guidelines you're going by and what type of flash it is. So your first piece could be considered flash. Now what that means is a few things for you. It definitely means that you want to be making all of your words count. So the details are going to be important, and the specific details are going to be important. Details need to contribute to the story, the plot, the character development, the meaning, all of those things, the mood. So from Moving Water Tucson, A Doll's Arm, Some Kid's Fort. And then later, he stood on wood in the bottom of the ditch, straddling the puny stream. Sorry for the spelling error. So what I think of when I read this is this first quote, A Doll's Arm, Some Kid's Fort. These seem to me to be quite fragile details, especially the way that the author has written them out. So, a doll's arm, some kid's fort. They could be any doll's arm. It could belong to you. It could belong to a child we know. Some kid's fort. It could be any kid's fort. He stood on wood in the bottom of the ditch, straddling the puny stream. Well, we've already heard the sound of this approaching body of water, yet this fragile child is standing there. Presumably he feels indestructible. He's showing off is what he's doing. But we recognize how fragile he really is. In Archipelago, my island of mimosa charms and sunny amulets. And then later, propellers spinning like silver doubloons through an operatic sunset. So throughout this short piece, the author uses these rich details, this layering of rich details to create the mood of the piece, the feeling of lushness, the feeling of this wealth of or extravagance of detail and extravagance of plenty in that place. And there's a contrast going on here. In the one place we have this lushness, in this other place we have a feeling of more sparse and contained cold. So one place is inviting and feels vibrant, the other place feels more restrained, less three-dimensional. And the author gives us this feeling, this sense, through the details that she chooses to share. So what does setting do? Well, in my memoir, Lucerne is more than just a place. It's the location where my parents met, where my mother felt very trapped, where my grandfather tried to keep the memories of my father alive, where I grew up, and where I felt loved. So for me, this place is rich in meaning. I could not be the person I am without this place. The events of my memoir could not have taken place without this place. So for me, some people will visit a cemetery if they want to feel close to family that's passed away. I visit my childhood home. So the Lucerne house is as much a character in my memoir as any other character. It is vital to the meaning of my book. The event in Moving Water Tucson couldn't take place in most locations. That location is vital to the meaning of the story. So, in addition to setting as a character, as something that's vital to meaning and to the story itself, setting often gives context to the actions of the characters. So some things are likely to take place in a certain time, a certain place, a certain setting. Other things are not likely to take place. A character's actions might be very different if they are set in this time and place as opposed to that time and place. And so setting again can be vital to understanding of the actions of characters. Additionally, without setting, a scene can feel ungrounded, as though you, the reader, are floating in some kind of a void. So watch this, because what will happen sometimes is the writer will have the setting in their mind. It's there. It's just like, it's like breathing. You know the setting, you have it in your head. It may not feel like it's that important to the story, and it might not be. However, for the reader to feel comfortable, for them to feel, okay, I'm walking into this room, what's on my right, what's on my left? I mean, you might not need to go into those kinds of details, but there needs to be a sense of grounding for the reader to feel comfortable, like they know what's going on in a particular setting. And so sometimes that requires that we add a lot of details, such as all the details that are in Archipelago. Sometimes it requires not that many details, depending upon the importance of the setting. Now, your first assignment, I've asked you to write something where setting is important. In both Archipelago and Moving Water Tucson, setting is everything. Without those settings, the events don't take place. So how does setting help to create meaning? Well, let's look at a few examples here. In Archipelago, the author is reminiscing of her time at this particular place. And we can see that she goes back to this place as a place of comfort and solace in the long winter that follows. She doesn't even feel the cold. She doesn't feel the cold, presumably because she's still on some level inhabiting the warmth of this place that she's left. So in terms of meaning, well, we get the sense in Archipelago that this is a place of longing for her. She's happy enough in New York, but this place holds special meaning for her. And it's probably a meaning of childhood. She can't go back to that place and recreate it, even if it's the same place, in the way that it was during those years. But she can go back to it in her mind, and it can continue to be a place of warmth and happiness and light. The whole desert might come apart at once. This story, Moving Water Tucson, is about that moment when everything changes. And I want you to be thinking about that moment when everything changes. You have the events that lead up to it, you can feel it coming on, and then the world shifts. So this is about this chaos. And the author makes good use of the details to demonstrate that feeling of chaos, that feeling that life can just take over in a moment and everything can change. And you can watch something devastating happen, but you're powerless to do anything about it. The wind across the deep snow is dry and penetrating. This is from Reverie by Jenna Butler. So I chose this particular passage, well, partly because it was close to the beginning of the text, but also because I think that this demonstrates location very well. Butler develops his homestead near Barhead. It's on the prairie. It's a harsh environment. When you live on the prairie, close to the land, you expect there to be hardship. And the payoff is often those few months of glorious summer sun. And so Butler is creating a contrast because, of course, the bees come out with the summer. The bees have to hibernate during these, well, they don't actually hibernate, but they kind of hibernate. They're in a sense of stasis that Jenna Butler feels as well. So the bees inhabit this stasis. Jenna Butler inhabits this stasis. They are waiting for spring to come. And so that's a part of this memoir. Then in The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating, so much of this book is about finding delight in things that are very small and trivial seeming. The snail could be a metaphor for the tiny things in life that we take delight in. The snail would make its way through the terrarium while the hands of the clock hardly moved. So in this story, the author finds solace in this little pet of hers, this little snail. And this snail offers her this kind of entertainment and sense of connection that nothing else can give her at this time in her life when she's very vulnerable, very much feeling like her life is out of her control. She's helpless in many ways. She can't easily get up. Every movement is a hardship for her. She relies on people to take care of her. This snail is a kindred spirit in a way. So setting is fundamental to The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. And it's not just the bed that the author inhabits, it's more this terrarium, this world that she's able to visit in her mind through her guide, the snail, that is the important place, the important setting in this story.